children, the Sun CSA, as part of the Sun CSA board member. Indeed, it's a memorable moment as we mark this 1 decade of strides and strives of Sun movements towards achieving our goal to end malnutrition in all its forms. Today, Kenya also joined the rest of the 62 member countries and 4 Indian states in celebrating Sun movement developmental milestone, a journey that has seen commitments made, national nutrition policy developed and revised, multi-stakeholder platform formed, and appointment of Sun focal point across governments. In my view, as a Sun youth leader, Sun movement has stayed on track in mobilizing collective action to end malnutrition. As we step into that phase, we can now look back and talk about what worked and what didn't work in these strategies and transformational roadmaps. One of the key achievements that I'm particularly proud of as a youth leader for nutrition is the formation of the Youth Leaders for Nutrition program that was launched in 2018 by the Sun Civil Society Network that is supporting 13 amazing youth leaders from different parts of the world. And just to share a clear picture on the journey of the Sun movement, I love to welcome everyone to see our animation video of the Sun movement. Welcome everyone and enjoy.
I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. There are so many lessons that we have. There are so many things that we can just tweak a little and do better.
Y ahora estamos con una delegación de 7 países que vienen justamente a ver lo que el Perú ha logrado.
The first is that I think we need to build broad constituencies for nutrition. I think both in countries and globally, I think we need to get citizens involved. And I think, like somebody said over the last 3 days, we need to make noise and we need to be visible. I think that's really important.
Came from all parts of the world, from all 60 countries of the Scaling Up Nutrition movement.
Happy 10th anniversary of Sun Movement. To help me break down the past, the present, and the future of Sun Movement, I'm joined by a very great speakers, that is David Navarro. David is the former Sun coordinator from 2010 to 2014. He has worked over 40 years of experience in international public as a community-based practitioner, educator, public servant director, and diplomat. And David is currently one of the 6 special convoy from DGWHO who are tasked to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. Welcome, David. Also, we are joined with Tom Arnold. He's the former Sun coordinator from 2014 to 2016. Tom is the former Director of General Institute of International and European Affairs. He also served in a number of government and non-governmental roles at national and international level. His current European and international commitments include serving as chair of the EU Commission's task force in the rural Africa. Welcome, Tom. And most important, Gada, here with us, is the Sun Movement Coordinator, and also the Assistant Secretary General. Gada brings extensive and broad experience from politics and international cooperation. Welcome, Gada. First and foremost, I love to start with David. David, from the Sun Movement, the moment it was created, I love for you to be able to share, just create a picture to the audience, who decided to create the Sun Movement and what are the reasons, and tell us a little bit of the early days on what happened and how many countries were supported to support this idea in formation of the Sun Movement. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much indeed, Jane. How long would you give me for answering your question?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Thank you very much. I'm just, well, I have to say what an absolute treat and privilege it is to be invited here. You don't normally get invited back to something you've done before and then left. So this is a real honor. Thank you, Jane, and thank you everybody in the movement. Thank you, Hado. In 2008, I was working on food security. It was at a time of massive rises in world food prices and also quite significant increases in levels of malnutrition among women and children all over the world. At that time, I was asked whether there were any ways in which the United Nations could be more focused and effective in helping communities and nations to reduce levels of malnutrition that were rising because of the food price crisis. I spent 6 months during this time when I was working for the UN Secretary General, trying to understand what might be possible. There was a very clear roadmap on the potential for scaling up nutrition. There was some very good scientific research on the need for better nutrition outcomes for human development. And there were countries who were communicating with the UN saying, we want to do more. And the objective given to me was to find an overarching umbrella organization into which there could be more energy and more action. After the 6 months consultation period with more than 60 people involved and a series of 5 meetings, the conclusion was that the future of action on nutrition would be best if it is led from within countries, if it involves a broad range of stakeholders, and if it focuses on an interdisciplinary approach to improving nutrition, which is tailored to the local situation. That was the proposal, and by September 2010, the concept of a movement with leadership from within countries, and each country developing their own multi-stakeholder response and adapting to the specific nutrition challenges faced by the people. That was the basis of the Sun Movement. Started with 15 countries in about 4 months after announcement in New York at a meeting with Ban Ki-moon and Hillary Clinton. Tom Arnold was there. I was sat in the audience. But then after that, over the next few years, it grew quite quickly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. That's quite a very nice story from the Sun Movement. And you have already shared how it all started. And maybe to welcome Tom, from the time the Sun Movement, maybe you can tell us, how did they start to realize in terms of nutrition that it can intersect with issues such as food security, agriculture, and if not, how did it work to convince them to be able to address this issue in line with nutrition? Welcome, Tom.
Jane, thank you very much. And I'd start, as David did, in saying what a treat and privilege it is to be part of this discussion this afternoon. I'd like to maybe just put in a bit more detail to what David has talked about on his journey, on the journey that he talked about as background. And for me, you know, the core elements that underpinned the Sun Movement was science, politics, people, and then the outcome of which was policies, which was the Sun Movement. On the science, I just want to talk about a couple of things that happened over the period 2006 onwards, which were critical. The first was in 2006, indeed, a really important report from the World Bank called Repositioning Nutrition as Central to Development. And what that really pointed out was how important early childhood nutrition was for long-term development, both at the level of the person and at the level of the country. 2007, an important moment when a new breakthrough in how to tackle severe acute malnutrition was brought about, called CMAM, the Community Management of Acute Malnutrition. I'm very proud to say that Ireland was centrally involved in that. 2 NGOs in Ireland, Valid International and Concern Worldwide, supported by Irish Aid, came up essentially with a new approach to dealing with severe acute malnutrition adopted by the UN in 2007. But the critical insight was, of course, that severe acute malnutrition represented less than 10% of malnutrition, and the other 90% of chronic undernutrition was leading to stunting. I think it was at that moment that the whole recognition of the seriousness, long-term importance of stunting came clear. That was further compounded and stressed by the Lancet report in early 2008. So there you had 3 important scientific breakthroughs, which provided the background against which now the politics comes in. And the politics then was framed by what David said, the food price crisis. The politics took its further extension the following year when there was a change of administration in the US. The Obama administration coming in with Hillary Clinton putting particular emphasis on the 1,000 days. And all of that led up to, if you like, the background to the Sun. I remember, David, sitting with you in a fairly chaotic meeting in Madrid in January 2009. And at that stage, you began to talk about a movement. A movement was what was necessary. And that was ultimately what led to that moment in September 2010, when Hillary Clinton and Micheál Martin, the then Foreign Minister for Ireland, effectively launched the Sun Movement. And I think the critical thing about this is a big idea, it's a big, simple idea. If you want to get change, somebody said to me once, you need to be able to come up with an idea that children and prime ministers can understand. That's not to say that any disrespect to either children or prime ministers, but the great ideas are the simple ideas. And that ended up manifesting itself in the Sun movement.
Thank you so much. Maybe you have mentioned about the issue of severe acute malnutrition. Does it mean that in the previous, like in terms of formation of Sun movement, the issue, it was more of undernutrition as compared to overnutrition?
At that stage, when people 10 or 12 years ago, when people used the word malnutrition, they effectively were talking about undernutrition. And that's one of the big changes now. When we now are talking about malnutrition, we are actually using the proper sense of the word, that it's a three-part problem. It's undernutrition, it's deficiency, micronutrition deficiencies, and increasingly it's overweight and obesity. So we've now a more complex version of malnutrition, and that's the one that we have to address from now on.
Okay, and what about addressing the issue of food security, climate change? Did it come across in terms of knowing that this may affect the nutrition status of people?
To a much lesser extent. I think the world we were dealing with in 2010, we were actually trying to deal with a global crisis, which consisted of a significant increase in the number of undernourished children. And we had indeed, of course, the economic crisis. What we have in 2020, and I think we should look as we talk further on, are there lessons to be learned from then to apply to now? We now have a more complex crisis. We've got malnutrition in all its forms, and we have a direct understanding of the link to health and the link to climate. And that's why now we're talking about food systems as an approach to deal with the increasingly complex reality of 2020 as opposed to 2010.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tom. I've just get some point from you that we need to come up with an idea that the children and the Prime Minister can be able to understand. Thank you so much, Tom. Gada, from what you've heard from Tom and David, maybe you can share, like, before you're able to join the Sun movement as the Sun coordinator, what have you learned, like the early days of the Sun movement? Thank you.
A lot, because David and Tom have thanked for the opportunity to be in this event, but it's totally our pleasure and our honor to have them, because we should never forget that as a coordinator, I can only do my work standing on their shoulders. So every successor needs to be aware of what the predecessor has accomplished. And David has explained what he did to bring the different players together in an agreement to a movement that is country-owned, multi-sectoral, and focusing on the local situation and interdisciplinary. And Tom has explained how to move further and the complexity of it. And I am standing on their shoulders, just like the Sun movement, when entering its third phase, we are building on the experiences and the developments and the progress that has been made in phase 1 and phase 2 of the Sun movement. This is something to recognize and to celebrate. And only if you know where you're coming from, the original idea and the drive of bringing the different players together to have a joint effort and to focus on country ownership and country leadership, you are able to make the right decisions on the future director. And I think that this movement approach is not only a valid approach for getting results on nutrition and in food systems, it should be there for all sustainable development goals. But it's not an easy task. It's much easier to draft a strategic vision with some specialists and then say, okay, as a global institution or a global player, we commit to do this. And then go to a country and say, we have committed to do this. So tell us what you want or where we can do this. No, it's the complexity of bringing people together, analyze where a country is, get indeed a political commitment, and then move forward. And building upon what Tom has said, you need to tell a narrative about nutrition, about everything, by the way, but also about nutrition that can be understood by a child and by the Prime Minister. I have experienced this very often, and I still try to do this. Of course, nutrition can be quite complex, whether you're talking about undernutrition, stunting, wasting, CMAM, micronutrient deficiencies, etc. But decision makers and children want to understand why nutrition is so important. And by telling them the story about the investment from the very beginning, so starting with the first 1,000 days for whatever kind of malnutrition, the first 1,000 days are of critical importance. It's the best gift in life for a child. Why? Because this is the best investment in physical health, in cognitive health and smartness, and in productivity. And very often we see malnutrition combined with poverty and other problems and challenges. And people who are well nourished are more capable to escape poverty and build and support a generation or a family that is outside of poverty and that can invest in its own dignity and its own decent future. So for the first wave, for the first round, I think this is enough. Thank you, and great to have you as a leader.
Thank you so much. Maybe to go to Tom. Can you tell us the key relevant events that you remember from the time you are the head of the Sun movement, and also how many, in terms of the Sun countries that you travel, how do you remember those visits? And in your opinion, how important were those visits? And was there impact at the end of that visit that you're able to go in the Sun countries?
Well, when I was asked to do this role in September 2014, I first of all encountered the secretariat, the small secretariat based in Geneva, incredibly hardworking people, a lot very young people, very motivated and inspired. Well, that's what happens when you work with David Nabarro. But so they were really, and what struck me immediately was how much engaged they were with all of the Sun member countries to help them think through their own challenges and put in place systems to make things better. We had in November 2014 the global gathering, which was associated in Rome with the International Conference of Nutrition. I mean, that was a really important event in terms of sharing experiences. But then the next big moment was in April 2015, when we were considering, a group of us were considering what the next phase of the Sun movement would be. This was based on a comprehensive evaluation of the first 4 years and was used then to frame and set down the strategy which would be followed from 2016 to 2020. And that was done during 2015. Important changes in the way the movement was governed. An executive committee established at that stage, a very wise decision that it should be led by Sean Baker. And so therefore, that was the scene was set for the next 4 years. In terms of visits, I would just recall a couple of them that are really, I thought were significant, really in terms of, say, the Sun as a multiplier. I recall attending a meeting in Namibia in September 2015, which was with SADC parliamentarians. So how could you then help build further political commitment at national level. That, as Gerda says, is absolutely fundamental. And secondly, a meeting towards the end of my tenure in July 2016 in Bangkok. It was an FAO regional meeting talking about nutrition, and it brought home to me this really serious problem that whole oceanic region had, particularly in terms of overweight and obesity. So they were some of the things. They were some of the things, Jane, that really struck me in that over that 2-year period. And then, of course, it was time to pass the whole thing on to the very capable hands of Gerda.
Thank you, Tom. Back to you, David. Tell us your story, how it has been, and also in terms of the countries that you travel, your experience. Thank you.
So I want to say something that really has stayed with me ever since this all started. As I traveled to countries, the thing that really affected me was the passion, energy, and clear thinking of all the national actors that were involved in scaling up nutrition. Each country felt different. The focal points were from different places. The local networks made up of different people. The issues were being tackled differently. But each country was showing such strong leadership and commitment. I felt by 2011, and then even more by 2012, that releasing the energy of national actors to define and then act on and then articulate how they are tackling malnutrition in all its forms, because they started doing that early, has been a really good thing to do. You see, Jane, you have a choice in international development. One approach is to say, we will find the interventions and we'll push them into every country so that there's a global program and that we're all doing the same and getting the best results. And that works really well when you're dealing with a problem with a defined solution that can be easily applied. However, with malnutrition, the causal factors vary from person to person, from place to place. It's not always a simple and repeatable process. And that's why the multi-stakeholder and very tailored approach of the Sun movement seems to work so well. Each community, each country working out their solutions and implementing them their way. I was so excited, and I've never since then wanted to do anything different. I've always felt since my early days, 2010, 2011, it's time to really let go so that everybody does the best they can with the knowledge they have, the experience they have, the science they can get hold of. Because on a complex issue like malnutrition, that surely is the right way to do things. I'm so pleased and so proud.
Thank you so much, David. I think that's a very nice feedback that you can share with the rest, that sometimes we need to let people, in terms of where we work, people can be able to do what works best for them, to at least give that people the chance to be able to do what they want to do. I think that's a very good point. Back to you, Gerda. Tell us how it has been, your journey. And we are still continuing the journey with you. Yeah.
I would like to highlight two events on this. One is a meeting that took place in a country. I think it was Malawi, where I had an early morning meeting with the Minister of Health and the Minister of Finance. And it was an early morning meeting, I think at 7 o'clock. And the Minister of Finance was grumpy because he was requested by the Prime Minister to replace the Prime Minister in this meeting, because I should have a meeting with, because nutrition needs to find its leadership, its political leadership at the top, in the top of the government, because of the multi-sectoral involvement. In some countries, even more than 10 departments are involved, and for good reasons. But the Minister of Finance, he was a little bit grumpy, and I noticed. But then, of course, we started to have the conversation, and I explained, he said, why should I pay attention to nutrition? Because it's never brought up in the election campaign. So why should I pay attention? If people can fill their belly, it's good enough. And then I started to explain about the importance of not only investing in people's health, children's health, families' health, but also in their cognitive development. And then I explained that if the cognitive development is not well nourished and well guided, supported in the first 1,000 days, children will be brain stunted for the rest of their life. And I also made the case about productivity. And then he said, Madam Coordinator, why have I turned to be, well, why needed I become 72 years old before somebody told me this story? Because I need to have the tax income, I need people to escape poverty. And now you are telling me that by investing in nutrition, it's the best start to not only invest in people, but also in the country's socioeconomic development. The same story is the story of ex-President Kikwete, who is a member of our lead group. At a certain moment, somebody told him why nutrition is so important. Not the complicated language, but why nutrition is the best gift in life for children. So that was one example. The other example, I would like to take you back, and most of you were there, and hopefully also the participants, to the global gathering in Kathmandu, where we have worked with the countries and with the different stakeholders to build the agenda. And where we have all seen in the workshops and in the plenary sessions, in-country people stepping up, showing that they are building stronger and stronger, building more and more ownership, telling the audience, this is how we are doing this, and this is what we want to learn from others. This is what we want to see as capability development, capacity development, and making things possible. And please support us in our demands. And we know that we need to do it ourselves, and we want to do it as a country, because we want to own and lead, to invest in people's dignity in communities, as David said. And this was such an important momentum, not only for me, but I think for all participants over there. And this is telling us that we have, that the movement has reached a strong foundation to further build on. And that is what we hope to do in the Sun 3.0 strategy and the implementation of it. It's a systems approach, it's a people approach, it's a country-owned, country-driven, and it is a platform. The Sun movement is a platform to bring all the players together and encourage them to work together and leave their siloed approach. And you know what? Where it is happening, everyone is much more, much happier, because the results are there and the results are telling their own story. Of course, there will be a lot of damage due to the COVID crisis, but the idea is moving on. And for that reason, we should be very hopeful for next year, and we should invest all our energy and inspiration to build forward better from COVID-19 using the Food System Summit and the N4G.
Thank you so much, Gada. Actually, you've answered. I was supposed to ask you something in regards to COVID-19. COVID-19 has changed our world in this year, and it has also bring a big impact in terms of nutrition. As much as trying to end malnutrition by 2030, what do you think? Sun movement is now more necessary than ever. Are we on track in terms of what we are able to plan by 2020 to end malnutrition by 2030?
I think the reality is that we are not on track. Nevertheless, we should not lose hope, and we shouldn't lose motivation to bring it back on track. But COVID is teaching hard lessons, and working with our in-country teams throughout the crisis, updating from time to time the country situation paper and making sure that one country could learn from other countries. We are learning a lot. And with we, I mention everyone in the movement. Let me mention a few things. One is that the whole food and nutrition system is vulnerable for disruption, and that we need to focus on this to make sure that it's more resilient to whatever emergency. Secondly, we have brought in many countries, our people, our Sun Movement members have made sure that in every emergency package, nutrition is included, be it in a hospital, be it in hands out to school kids or to families, poor families, etc. Finally, there is the understanding that solutions need to be found close to where people live. So if there is a disruption between one country and the rest of the world, and if supporters and humanitarian helpers cannot reach the region, you need to make sure that you have your own systems in place. And that is what David was referring to. So it has become clear to the world that this is a systems issue per country. So as I used to say, we will support rolling out the Sun Movement strategy, but I expect that we will have 62 different Sun movements, depending on which country, because they all will do it in their own way, taking things from where they are. And that should make us extremely proud. And the Sun Movement is the platform of bringing people together, but also the advocate at all levels, country level, subnational level, regional level, and global level. And there, I can only hope that decision makers and investors will understand that they need to prioritize nutrition in every support package in order to prevent a next stunted or malnourished generation.
Thank you so much. And maybe once again, I wanted to, maybe from your experience, which new areas do you think will intersect well with nutrition? Apart from we are speaking about climate change, yeah.
Oh yes, but it's not new. That is already there from the beginning. The recognition is coming, and I think the Food System Summit, of which David is leading the in-country food systems dialogues, are really bringing the different people to the table, and that is the first time. And I think this is a great breakthrough, and I would like to encourage each and everyone, make sure that you are involved in the in-country food systems dialogues, but also in the commitment making for N4G, because nutrition needs to be part and parcel of it, and it's not too difficult. It's a matter of will, of collaboration, and it's a matter of sorting out how this can be done from a country perspective, making sure that the government takes responsibility and that there is also domestic budget allocation. because developing an agenda and then look for funders only outside the country, that's not the right token of ownership. If you have a national plan, make sure that there is also domestic budget available, even if it's only 10% of the whole, but it's bringing the commitment. It's also involving members of parliament much stronger.
Okay, thank you so much. David, from your view, why do you think that Sun movement is more important more than ever?
Thanks very much indeed, Jane. I almost want to ask you these questions, but I can't because you're in charge. So I will be well behaved and I will answer. So people tell me that levels of malnutrition really are rising all over the world. There are more children who are undernourished, both wasted and stunted. Also, there are more children with nutrient deficiencies. There are more children and adults who have got excess nutrition, who are obese. And the numbers are increasing. And of course, we want an end to malnutrition by 2030. That's in the Sustainable Development Agenda. But the reality is, as Gerda just eloquently stated, we're not there. So there's a choice. Are we going to together respond to malnutrition through programs that are implemented all over the place? I mean, I don't know a nice, convenient program that prevents obesity. I don't know a nice, neat way to reduce stunting everywhere. That's because both stunting and obesity are outcomes of multiple determinants. It's not a single disease or a single food shortage or a single problem in the home that results in lots of children being stunted. No, you get stunting resulting from many different causes. And that's why the Sun movement is so important. Because at the heart of the thinking in the Sun movement is this truth that the circumstances which lead to malnutrition vary from location to location. And that's why we must hand over to local leaders at the community level, at the city level, at the national level, and we must say to them, here's what we know, but you, the local leaders, you have the information about what really matters in your community. So we say, take what we have and apply it the best possible way in the local context. And we, people from miles away, kilometers away, we can't possibly know how malnutrition should be tackled in each different situation. We have to trust local leaders to do it. Again, Gerda said, Sun is really a collection of lots of movements. And I think that's the truth. I think that we've seen over the last 10 years, lots of movements for better nutrition all over the world. And each one is working out how best to improve nutrition in their own setting. So why is Sun so important now? Because it's a really good example of locally empowered individuals and organizations doing the best for their people in ways that respond to the context within which they are becoming malnourished. I want there to be more sun movements for more issues which need local leadership and collective action. I am so proud of being on the Sun Lead group and part of the movement.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David. I think that's a good statement. Each country have unique challenges and experience. So it's good to engage the local leaders, the local governments to be able to address this issue of malnutrition. Thank you so much. Just to closing out for this session, I'd love to go back to Tom. Tom, just a quick one. Do you think that we are on track and in terms of to end malnutrition in all its forms, and in terms of supporting of the Sun stakeholders, is it possible to end this issue of malnutrition by 2030? Just a quick one. Thank you.
It's a huge task to do that, as Gerda has very honestly acknowledged. But if there is to be any chance of doing it, it is going to be from exactly what David talked about, trusting in the initiatives and in the ownership of people at local level. But if that bottom-up approach can be complemented by a top-down approach, whereby at the senior political level, there is acknowledgement that this issue has to be an increasingly important priority, that's the condition where we might have some chance of succeeding. I want to come back to what I said at the beginning about a change, some of the similarities between now and over 10 years ago. One is the fact that we're facing a crisis, that sense of crisis caused by the COVID and the need to build back out of that crisis and to really rethink the future world that we're going to do it. We're also going to do it, I think, with a different American administration. I mean, given that we're speaking intimately among friends here, I think I can be frank to say that Donald Trump has been the most unpopular American president since George Washington established the office in 1789. Biden is coming in with a wave of goodwill, and it's not just because he's different than Trump in politics and character, it's because he's going to bring the US back with all its strengths to help and work with the rest of us solve the great challenges of our day. So I think that there's a real sense we should look to 2021 as a real year of opportunity, with the help of the vaccine, building back out of this crisis. But we have to make sure that as we look to this new world, that food and nutrition security and climate change are absolutely central to the global agenda going forward. And that's why the Food Systems Summit is of such importance. And I think there's a lot of very good work going on involving in it. It's bringing together the politics, the science, the people, the sense of common ownership of a problem and how we can find this solution. So that's, I think, very much a positive, which I think we should take and build on looking to the future. And the Sun movement has a crucial role to play in all of this.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tom. Maybe to highlight what you have also mentioned is that it is good that we involve the local leaders. And like Gado always said, we need to get out of our comfort zone. And so the case goes to all the Sun countries, the local leaders, so that at the end of the day, we all work together as a team to end malnutrition in all its forms. Thank you so much. It's been a great experience and great conversation. Now
Jane,
we go to,
before you leave the podium,
yes.
I think it is on behalf of David and Tom, but also the 102 participants,
yes.
That I say a big thanks to you before you hand over. It's not only the local leaders, there's also a message for global leaders to invest in country-driven solutions and to think more from a country level and a subnational level. This is also something because also the global players are members of the Sun movement. But before you leave, and it's not because of the unique situation that you are leading a debate with us, is that I want to mention two groups that needs to be uplifted and put in front much more. One is women, because women are crucial for malnutrition. So starting with girls, let them go to school, adolescent girls, and young women, because healthy women can give birth to healthy children and breastfeed them, which is the first miracle in life that can happen, because breastfeeding has all. Secondly, it's young people. And it is my dream and my wish that just like the youth action for climate has evolved, there is also a youth action for nutrition. And you and the other people in the Sun movement are developing this action group, this wave of young people stepping up, taking the lead, making clear how important this is for them and for their generation. And I can only say how immense proud I am of you and the rest of the youth leaders, and we will involve even more. So I would like to say thank you, David. Thank you, Tom, for what you have done for the Sun movement. Our work is building on what you have accomplished. And as Sun movement coordinator, I stand on your shoulders. And thank you very much for this.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Gada. Maybe we can, I don't know if we have enough time for Q&A.
Actually, I was taking notes during the meeting, but I think the conversation flowed very nicely, Jane, and you handled it very well, and you actually asked some of the questions that were coming up in the chat box. There's been some good questions from Dr. Dahir from Somaliland, Pat McMahon as well. And I think one of the questions coming through is why haven't we moved forward as fast as we might have hoped? But I think you've touched upon that. And then there are a couple of specific questions that if somebody could pick them up in a couple of minutes. Why can't the network seem to work together effectively in most country situations? There's a challenge there for all of you maybe to answer. And then how does social protection play out in food systems for those that are most disadvantaged? Some quite specific questions. And then a big question coming through is that we haven't moved as quickly as we might have hoped, and why is that? So please feel free, any of the three panel members, to take maybe one of those questions, and then I'll leave it to Jane to wrap up. I don't think there's time for all three of them.
I'd deal with that, if you like, the social protection issue. I think one of the consequences of the COVID crisis has been countries have had to look a lot more seriously at social protection within their own countries. There's a World Bank study which has examined the number of countries that have done that, and it's very considerable. And I think part of that debate as well is what role does food support, food and nutrition support, play in social protection systems. So I think it's an issue that's now on the agenda and is going to have to stay on the agenda and be further built upon in the years ahead.
Thank you
very much, Tom. David, did you want to come in?
Thanks very much indeed. I mean, in reality, there are lots of reasons why stakeholder groups don't always pull together. One of the reasons is that quite often when we are in different stakeholder groups working on an issue, we are understandably more interested in how our stakeholder group is seeing than in dealing with the problem that we're working on together. And this is quite well known in management science. And in order to overcome it, it's necessary to put the problem in the center and then find ways to leave our affiliations and our logos behind. The networks, when they were set up, started with a recognition that different stakeholder groups would find it hard to get together. And that's why right from the beginning, we said we will constantly need to find ways to help the networks. First of all, always focus on the problem as identified by the country. And secondly, work together. It's just something that needs continuous attention. Now, the reason why malnutrition can't be dealt with just like that, with a flick of a finger, the press of a button, or the rollout of a vaccination program, is that malnutrition has multiple causes. And certainly, given that multiple causality, it is inevitable that there are going to be different degrees of the nutritional challenge and different solutions. And some of the challenges are, quite honestly, political. And when you've got a challenge that's political, there's no technical solution for it. You have to work on it as a political issue. If a big cause of malnutrition increase, which we're seeing at the moment, is as a result of a combination of war and climate change and other factors, obviously mending that situation is going to be quite difficult. And that's why anyone who's working on nutrition, I believe, has to be prepared for a rocky ride or a roller coaster ride, given that the nutritional status of people is hugely influenced by contextual factors which are not inside at least our control. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
But there is also very good news here, because the Sun Movement networks and the Secretariat for Phase 3 will work as one, delivering as one at the country level. So we are learning by doing, and there is a huge commitment to do this and to support what is happening at country level. Why aren't we making a good progress? Exactly as David has said. Nevertheless, there is a lot of progress, because more and more the Sun Movement has about 20 countries where there is a fragile or conflict affected situation. And we are working closely now to bring the humanitarian support and the development support together. And there I would like to make one proposal that can help the collaboration. And that is that donors and investors in nutrition, that they put into their criteria the collaboration between players at country level and the investment in building in-country capacity and supporting in-country leadership and ownership. Once this is a criteria for donors, for donation funding and investment, it's an encouragement for organizations to step up and invest in it. And it will be extremely helpful for in-country impact and in-country nutrition ownership. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I thank you all, David, Garda, and Tom, for amazing discussion. And I believe the audience are able to get a clear picture on where Sun is from past, present, and future. Maybe to wrap up the session is that it is important to work closely with all partners in terms of the local leaders and also at the global level. I believe it all comes to working together to be able to fight this malnutrition. And also, Gada mentioned the issue of what to help also the women and the adolescents, because they also play a crucial, like in terms of facing the issue of malnutrition. And I love the way you're able to address the issue of adolescents. It's still a very big issue that we need to address. And it's true, like you said, that it's not that we may say that you're on track, but not there yet. But I'm happy that despite COVID-19, we're able to see that a lot of Sun movement has done a lot in terms of at the global level and also national level. And I'm happy that to be able to be part of this discussion, and hoping that from this, all the objectives that you've set in the Sun movement is going to work very well. And thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. And we hope that we all say that to make commitments is that we stand by our commitments and fulfill as we try much to fight malnutrition and to reach to our state set goals as Sun movement. Thank you so much, everyone.
Please follow me in an applause for Jane and for all the organizers of this magnificent and very interesting conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to say thank you. I wanted to say thank you to you, Jane, but you're so professional. You didn't give me a space to come in and give you a big hug. Thank you very, very, very much indeed for the way you've moderated this. It's beautiful. I will never forget it. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.